بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Inshallah, moving on to the next chapter, which is in regards to the white hair of the Blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the previous chapter, we talked in general about the hair of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In this chapter, it's very, very specific in regards to the aging hair or the gray and the white hair of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A few discussions that will take place in this chapter, as well as the next one, which talks about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dyeing the gray hair, applying dye to the gray hair of his blessed head and his blessed beard, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First and foremost, the initial discussion would be, did or did not, in regards to the existence of the white hair on the head and the blessed beard of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of the companions, similar to the first narration here from Anas radiallahu an, that did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam apply dye to his hair? Anas radiallahu anhu replies negatively by saying he didn't reach such an age where a person would apply dye to his hair. Some of the other companions talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam not having any white hair. But obviously, looking at almost all the narrations, or at least most of the narrations, they do indicate that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did have some amount of gray hair on his blessed head and his blessed beard. The second discussion would be how much of his blessed head and his blessed beard was turned gray or white. The number of white hair differs from narration to narrations, because just the way Sheikh Zakaria rahimahullah explains, that this is something which is going to differ from time to time. If one companion narrates a number in a narration about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam having a certain amount of hair, it will always change before or after. Maybe he had few less before and he had a few more after. Or it could be on personal observation, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't always with a bare head. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't always as close to every individual. So every personal observation would differ. So this is the reason why there's different numbers mentioned in different narrations in regards to the blessed, the white hair that, the number of white hair that was in the blessed head and the blessed beard of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One discussion is, where did these areas exist in which the white hair was? There's actually 3 different areas that are mentioned in the light of ahadith where the white hair existed. But before we can go there, in regards to the previous discussion, even though all the narrations might differ in the number, some say less, some say more, but all of them unanimously agree that the white hair on the blessed head and the blessed beard of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not exceed the number 20. It was always less than 20. If you were to reconcile between all the different narrations, we would always agree that it will not exceed the number 20. There are 3 different areas in which these white hair existed. Number 1, as it comes in the ahadith, mafraq al-ra's, the split of the head. We talked in the previous chapter in regards to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam parting his hair. He would split his hair exactly down the middle. And whenever he would do so, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have a few white hair in the exact parting of his hair. That's one of the area it's mentioned. And inshallah we'll cover a narration which is going to come in this chapter, that whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would apply oil to his hair, the shine from the oil would actually hide the white hair. And you wouldn't be able to tell that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually had that white hair. The second area are the temples. The area where the beard meets the hair of the head. So both sides of the temple. So right where the beard ends, or the beard starts and the head hair ends, in those two areas. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had some graying there. In the third area, it is described in the hadith as anfaqah, which is the area under the lip, which is the small amount of hair which is under the lip before the actual beard. So it's the area between the chin and the lower lip. So this area also had a few white hair on the blessed face of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam apply dye to his hair or not? Since the next chapter completely deals with this subject, we will leave it up to there, and it will come into detail, but just for the sake of answering the question, yes, he did. Now, did he do it? How often did he do it? And what type of dye did he use? All these things, inshallah, it would come in the next chapter. The name of this chapter that Imam Tirmidhi chose is Babu ma ja'a fi shaybi Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The word shayb, those things that come under shayb, in Arabic, everything has its unique definition. Whenever you see a person aging, if the apparent signs of aging would come under the definition of shayb. And obviously the most apparent sign of aging is graying of the hair. And then another word that is used also, it comes in the ahadith, and it comes in a lot of the supplications that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made, is haram. And haram is actually when the body begins to weaken. And kharaf is another word which is used for a person whose mental health begins to deteriorate. So if your body itself starts giving up strength, that is called haram. But if your mental health begins to deteriorate, it's called kharaf. And overall, just the signs of aging is called shayb. So this is specifically what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ahadith refer to. Not necessarily the white hair of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the aging of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this word shayb in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Allahu alladhi khalaqakum min du'f. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you from a very, very weak state. Min du'f. ثُمَّ جَعَلَ مِن بَعْدِ ضُعْفٍ قُوَّةٍ. And after this weakness, He blessed us with strength. ثُمَّ جَعَلَ مِن بَعْدِ قُوَّةٍ ضُعْفًا وَشَيْبًا. And after this strength that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with, He gave us weakness and an old age. If we were to analyze all the different verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the earlier stages of Islam, in the Meccan era, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was revealed different verses from the Holy Quran, we will see a pattern that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the people over and over, mainly the kuffar of Quraysh, because a lot of this had to do with tabligh, da'wah wa tabligh, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was preaching the true message of Islam. We will see that there is a pattern that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala follows, in which He tells us over and over to pay attention to our own creation and the creation around us. Because the Arabs, at that time, and even a lot of people nowadays, they're very inclined towards nature. They're very nature oriented. They get amazed with the different creation. And this is just the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, that whenever we see something very uniquely created, we get affected by this creation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries a pattern throughout the Meccan surahs that He will always tell us to observe our own creation. Many ayahs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions just about the creation before a child is even born. The pre-birth era of a human. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with a drop of fluid, how He creates us and carries us through different stages until we're blessed with a soul and we have been assigned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enter this world. If you were to ponder over the verses in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the nations before us, there are two things He mentions. First is our own creation. What is insan? What is the actual existence of a human being? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. A human being is very weak to begin with. And then, not only that, it has many weaknesses. We don't want to go into the detail of all the weaknesses that are only mentioned in the Quran, let alone the ahadith and the personal observations that we go through on an individual level, that we ourselves would carry many weaknesses of ourselves. Not only that the human being himself is created weak, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us that compare yourselves to the people before you. And He gives us different examples. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever any individual would boast about his personal strength, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us an example. Ponder over the strength of Ad and Thamud. That the way they were created, they carried such high status, quwwatin wa bas, that they had such high status in strength that you don't even compare anywhere close to them. If a person feels that his mental reasoning is why he would be protected from the calamity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and why he would be right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that, look at the examples before you. Look at Haman. When he was told, قَالَ إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُهُ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ عِنْدِي. This was given with my personal knowledge, my personal experience. This is something that I had. Same way that if a person believes that his financial status would save him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and justify his way of living, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that if you were to look at Qarun, just the keys of his treasures, not even the treasure, just the keys of his treasure, we would need an army just to carry the keys so that we can gain access to his treasures. So this is the financial status. And over, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the power of Fir'aun, the different status of people before us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it does not matter. If we feel that we have the power to protect ourselves in our homes, look at those nations that protected themselves. They carved their homes and their castles out of mountains. And mountains are created in such a fashion that any calamity that comes, it would safeguard them. But when the calamity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls, every single creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over and over. Similarly, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in this ayah, Allahu alladhi khalaqakum min du'f, that He created us weak, to the extent that we couldn't even feed ourselves. The most essential part of survival in a human life, we couldn't even do that. That we could not lift a piece of morsel and put it into our mouth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us so weak. And He gave us so much strength that we started rebelling against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that we're going to make you go through a cycle of life where you would go to such a degree that you could not tell the difference. It would be so weak that just the way you couldn't lift a morsel of food to your mouth, you would be in a very, very similar stage. If we were to analyze the cycle of life, and you're walking through a shopping aisle where there is children items in one aisle and elderly items in one aisle, and you would see that if you were to do a face-to-face comparison of a child and an elderly person, we would see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completes the life cycle in every single human being that lives up to that age. If you were to just just put a child and an elderly person side by side, if you were to just start from the top, if you were to look at their head, just their physical appearance, their head, if you were to look at the hair of a child and hair of an elderly person, you will see that a child is waiting to get his hair and the elderly person is just crying over losing his hair. You will see that the pattern just continues, that the child is slowly gaining his hair and the elderly person is slowly losing his hair. And if you were to come down, and before we can come down to the eyes, if you were to just look inside and look at the brain of a child and look at a brain of an elderly person. And, we might seem like, we might be doing justice to the elderly, but in reality, if you ever took responsibility of catering towards an elderly parent or a grandparent or someone older, we would realize that it is just as difficult to cater to an elderly person just the way it is to a child. If you were to look at a mentality of an elderly person is very, very similar to a mentality of a child. It's very difficult to explain anything. It's very difficult to convince them. It's very difficult to move them away from what they have already made a mental note of. That they're going to do something this way is going to stay that way. They have only one way, and changing that just makes it so much more difficult. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completing this life cycle. If you were to look at the statistic today, I was surprised. In this day and age, in the country that we live in, 1 out of every 8 Americans is a senior citizen. 1 out of every 8 American is a senior citizen. And the reasoning for this is that obviously the old age homes are filled with this. And if you were to ponder over why these old age homes are populated and why the adoption facilities are populated, you will see the same determining factor. That there is somebody in their life that have given them up to taking care of them. It's very simple. If you were to look at why adoption centers are full with children and why old age homes are filled with elderly, is the same determining factor. That somebody has given up on them. Now, if you were to come down from the head to the eyes, there is a huge theory on how a child's vision develops from when his vision is upside down to when it's black and white to when it fully develops. And similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the vision of a perfectly person and He would start making it deteriorate to the extent that almost every single person is in need of using glasses at some point in their life to make sure that their vision stays proper for them to continue their work. Going down to the ears. If you were to look at it, elderly have trouble understanding, trouble hearing. A child has trouble understanding, trouble hearing. If you're going down to the mouth, they both have very little teeth to no teeth. Similarly, a child is waiting for his teeth to grow, and an elderly person is just waiting for his teeth. He doesn't know, just the way a child would grow up and not know that this specific tooth is coming out. An elderly person would go to sleep not knowing which tooth is going to fall off in the morning. And this is the reason why just the way it's difficult to understand a child when he's speaking, it is just as difficult to understand an elderly person when he's speaking. Very similar, side-by-side comparison. If you were to look at hands, and just the way a child would not have very good grip. You see a child consuming water from a glass, you will see that they're spilling water. If you see an elderly person drinking and consuming water from a glass, you will see the same types of spills. If you were to see the legs, they both cannot walk extensively. You will see that children are carried in strollers, or they will have their own rollerblades and skateboards, where you will see elderly, they are being carried in their wheelchair, or they have their own mobile scooter, or their wheelchair that they would carry themselves in. And this list will just continue. If you look at their dressing, if you look at their bathroom, if you look at their bathing, if you look at their sleeping, if you look at their eating, their monitoring, safety, every single thing, it's side by side. If you were to look at if a child requires a little railing on the side of his bed, an elderly person requires that same railing. If a child requires a little stool to sit on the seat of the toilet, an elderly would require a similar type of support to sit or get off the toilet. If you were to look at a baby needs a monitor next to him when he's sleeping, an elderly person needs an emergency alert monitor. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completes this cycle. Just the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us so weak that we did not have any control over ourselves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take us to that stage where we're not, if it is destined for us to live to that stage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take us to a stage where we're going to be just a baby, and even if we wanted to lift our hand to do something, we would need someone to help us do that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let us go through this journey while we are handing ourselves to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions about getting old. He says, every single person, every single birthday that goes by, every single minute that clicks, every single second, every single day that goes, the man is getting older. So the son of Adam is getting old. But there are two things which continuously grows younger in him. وَيَشِبُّ مِنْهُ إِثْنَانِ. There's two things that continue to grow younger. As we're getting older, we're getting more power. We're getting more financially stable. We're gaining more strength. We are progressing in life. We are climbing the success of our life. But there are two things, as we grow older, they are growing stronger and they're holding roots. You know, when a person, he's young, the example that is given, it's like, you know, the weed that grows in our garden. If we were to look at a patch of grass, and you will see a piece of weed that's growing in our grass. Similarly, the negative habits that we have is just like that weed. They're very weak to the extent that if you were to tell a child, might be able to just pluck it out very easily. When this habit continues to grow, at one point, it would grow so strong that even heavy machinery will have difficulty pulling this same exact root, same exact weed that grew in that garden. So just the way, if a person, when he's young, if we were to eliminate the evils of our inside, the diseases that we carry on the inside, it is so easy to do it in our youth. As we grow older, these things hold on to our life so much that it is impossible to even remove it with heavy machinery. Then we can do all the tawbah, we can work on all the different methods, try to eliminate this habit of ours, but it will be just as difficult. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is talking about when a man is climbing the ladder of success in his life, he is growing old, but there are two items which grow very, very strong and they grow young. Number one is greed. Number one is greed. The greed of anything and everything. It's amazing, a miracle of Allah, of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we will see if a person, if he has, just the way he mentioned in another hadith and another narration, that just the way if a person was to have a mountain of gold, he would want a second. And he would promise that after the second one, he will stop. But if he was to get a second one, he would want a third, and he would promise that after he gets the third, he will stop. A person started with a little store in the mall, and now he has 13 big factories, and yet he is not content, because he's saying, once I get the 14th one, and I'll stop. And the only thing that will fulfill the stomach, the desire of this human being is the dirt from the qabr. These are the words of the blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second thing that grows younger in a human being is desires. The two key elements which hold on to our inner selves, and they establish their roots to such a degree that we would realize that these two things, desires and greed, will just continue to grow stronger in every aspect of life. When winter comes around, we say we're going to buy a very expensive, nice pair of boots, and we're going to stop. But it doesn't stop there. Because it's either the greed, or it's either the desire that will make you buy another one. That will make us go for a third one, and a fourth one. And it will just continue in every aspect of life. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned very beautifully, value 5 things before 5 things. اغتنم خمسا قبل خمسا. The Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions that value 5 things before 5 things. Take advantage of 5 matters before other 5 matters overpower you and you're not able to take fully advantage. Number 1, take advantage of your youth before you become old. And this is exactly 100% relevant to our chapter here. That as we are growing older, we need to take advantage. Today, we are able to put our forehead in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tomorrow, we might not be able to do so. There's so many people that we will see, they were perfectly fine yesterday. All it took is one slip on the stairs, and now this person for the rest of his life will not be able to rest that forehead in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout his life. And we see scenarios like this over and over. So take advantage of your youth before you become old. Number 2, take advantage of your health before you fall sick. Health is one of the biggest blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it is due to our health that we're able to fulfill, or at least attempt to fulfill, the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you were to fall sick, we would not even be able to attempt that. Number 3, value your health, take advantage of your health before you become poor. Today, if we have some extra funds, if we have anything extra sitting around, which we can distribute, we can contribute towards the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to take advantage of that before it's not there tomorrow. Number 4, value your free time before you become preoccupied. Today, if we're doing one job and we're having some extra time, today we are not taking so many classes and we have some extra time, take advantage of that extra time before tomorrow you become so preoccupied that we're not able to take that time out. And lastly is a lesson of life, take advantage of your life before you die. It's a very simple rule of life that we do not know. There is thousands, there is almost a few thousand in number of just children dying every year. Just in car accidents. Just due to alcohol. We don't even want to go into those statistics. There are thousands of children under the age of 18 that are dying with this one very narrowed reason. Just in car accidents under the age of 18 just due to alcohol. This is not including all the other accidents due to whether it would be weather, whether it would be reckless driving, whether it would be any other reasoning. Just due to alcohol, there's thousands and thousands of deaths every single year. Because there is no chance that we would live to rest our forehead on the ground again. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reminding us to take advantage of these situations. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all the time would supplicate against many negative things. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a habit of supplicating through against many negative things, and one of them was ardhalil umar. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ardhalil umar. And one of them was haram, and they both mean very, very old age. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam seeked refuge from this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over and over. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to take advantage of what we have today and continue to give us these blessings throughout our life and take us in the best stage. Ameen. Inshallah, moving on to the narrations in which we're going to discuss the white hair and the growing age of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وبالإسناد المتصل منا إلى الإمام الترمذي رحمه الله تعالى قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار قال أخبرنا أبو داود قال أخبرنا همام عن قتادة قال قلت لأنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه هل خضب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم؟ قال لم يبلغ ذلك، إنما كان شيبا في صدغيه ولكن أبو بكر خضب بالحناء والكتم. Qatada rahimahullah mentions that I asked Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu an, did the Blessed Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam apply dye to his hair? So Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu an, he mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not reach that age. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not reach such an age where one would have to apply dye. And then he clarifies, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did have a few white hair on his temples. However, Abu Bakr radiyallahu an used to dye his hair with hina and katam. Firstly, why did Anas radiyallahu anhu reject the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam dyed his hair? One of them, he never rejected that he didn't apply it. Some of the commentators, they mentioned that Anas radiyallahu anh mentions that he did not reach a stage where he would have to do it as a habit. And if we see elderly person, that he would continuously do it as a habit because obviously the gray hair would just grow out, then maybe in a week or two or in a month, he would have to do it again. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not do it as a habit. And the other explanation that is given is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did apply it, but he did not apply it to the entire hair and the entire beard. Just the way a person who is aging and the entire beard and the entire head would need to be dyed throughout. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have to do that. These are the two explanations that is given in regards to the rejection of Anas radiyallahu anhu. In this specific narration, it mentions Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, but all the different muhaddithin, they unanimously agree that not only Abu Bakr, but Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman radwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, they all applied a dye to their hair. And lastly, bil hina wal katam. These two things, hina and katam, they both are plants, which is used from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even before the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it is also used. And hina is something that not only that it is used to apply color to the hair, but it is also used for dyeing skin, dyeing hair, and fingernails. These are different methods that is used across the world in regards to applying color to the skin, to the hair, as well as fingernails. And katam is also a different type of plant which is used sometimes explicitly and sometimes with the mixture of hina to give a specific tone and color when dyeing hair or when applying color to the skin. وبه قال حدثنا إسحاق بن منصور ويحيى بن موسى قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق عن معمر عن ثابت عن أنس رضي الله عنه قال ما عددت في رأس رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ولحيته إلا 14 شعرة بيضاء. Anas ibn Malik رضي الله عنه narrates that I did not count more than 14 white hair on the blessed hair and the blessed beard of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Again, this is even though there are different narrations and the numbers different by each companion in a different narration, but no narration exceeds the number 20. We already talked about this, and also the reasoning has Shaykh al-Hadith, Shaykh Zakaria rahimahullah mentions that obviously it is personal observation, and sometimes a person would not see the head of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because it would be covered with an imama, and sometimes if you were to just sit on one side and observe the white hair only from one side, the number could differ. And also, one of the reasoning that is given is, which will also come coming in a narration, the next narration is that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would apply oil to his hair, the shine from the oil would actually overcome the white hair, and you would not be able to differentiate between the white and the black hair. Moving on to the next narration. وبه قال حدثنا محمد بن مثنى قال أخبرنا أبو داود قال حدثنا شعبة عن سماك بن حرب قال سمعت جابر بن سمرة رضي الله عنه وقد سئل عن شيب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال كان إذا دهن رأسه لم ير منه شيب وإذا لم يدهن رؤي منه شيء. When Jabir bin Samurah رضي الله عنه was asked in regards to the gray hair of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he replied that whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would apply oil, you would not be able to see the hair, the white hair. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not apply the oil, you would be able to see the white hair. And again, this was due to the shine from the oil, and we talked about it in detail in the previous chapter that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a habit of putting abundance of oil, to the extent that sometimes he would put so much oil that he would have to place another cloth over his head just to make sure that the oil from his hair and his beard does not soil the linen of his bedding or the imamah. So he would place another piece of cloth over his head, and that oil, the extra excessive oil from the hair would be observed onto that cloth. And it comes in the narration that it used to look like a cloth from a person who sells oil, from an oil seller, that it would be so much oil on there. So, and this was very, very necessary due to the dryness of Arabia, and this is something that when a person has a lot of hair, to avoid any kind of skin irritation or any unhealthy skin issues on the head, you would have to apply a lot of hair in those areas where there's a lot of heat. وبه قال حدثنا محمد بن عمرو بن وليد الكندي الكوفي قال حدثنا يحيى بن آدم عن شريك عن عبيد الله بن عمر عن نافع عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنه قال إنما كان شيب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نحو من 20 شعرة بيضاء. In this narration, Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had about 20 in number. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had about 20 hair in number. And inshallah, we're going to end with this. In this specific chapter, Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah mentioned 8 different narrations. Alhamdulillah, we're able to cover 4 today, and inshallah we'll cover 4 more next week. But before we can finish, one thing I wanted to point out was one of the reasons why commentators mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam to have abundance of white hair was some individuals in certain areas or with certain backgrounds would consider this, specifically in women, as it comes in some of the books of history, that specifically in women, it is considered a defect in a man to have graying hair. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want anything that can jeopardize the iman of any believer. There is a book called Halawatul Muta'allimin, in which they mention the reasoning for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam having very, very limited white hair is for the protection of the believers, and specifically female believers, mu'minat. The reason is because even if you were to object on the physical appearance on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it would jeopardize the iman. It would lead towards disrespect of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that disrespecting would lead towards defecting our iman, and it would lead to very severe cases. And this is the reason why we talked about this in very detail about the love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had, that not only in his characteristics, not only in his personality, not only in his ethics, but even in his physical description, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was above and elite above any person. Whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would walk, he would appear taller than everybody else. Whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would sit next to an artificial light, he would be more brighter than the light. Why are all these things there? And we can count numerous attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with, whether it was in his natural state or whether it was through a miracle. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have any defect, whether it would be inner defectiveness or outer. Any outer, in the outer appearance. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was made perfect by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every single fashion. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to acknowledge the status of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to act upon everything that has been said. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير